This is Roportaj, and I'm Danish bin Nabi. Today, I have with me one of the poets and authors, Abhay K, to talk about his recently released book, Nalanda and How It Changed the World. The book offers a sweeping explanation of one of history's greatest learning centers. More from Mr. Abhay.
Mr. Abhay, before we dive into the book, let me ask you a simple question. Why is it important for the real generation to understand what Nalanda is?
I think it's very important to remember uh, our heritage. And most of us do not know much beyond uh, that Nalanda was a great institution of learning. We have no idea what was the contribution of Nalanda, uh, who taught there, who was studying there, and how has Nalanda been a pioneer, in fact, in what we know today as universities. How has Nalanda pioneered the modern educational institutions? So all these things, I wanted the current generation to know about.
And do you think you have been successful in putting all the pieces together for this real generation who have no interest in history or reading the books?
That's why I have kept the book short and to the point, so that anybody who has no interest in reading can pick up the book. And once someone picks up the book, I think there's a flow. It's unput downable. So I have tried to put the book in a way which is interesting for people and is to the point, so they can get maximum information in minimum time.
Mr. Abhay, point taken, and now into the book. Let's go in a chronological order, and let's start with the Ashoka emperor. And you write about Ashoka that it was he in the 3rd century who first put this Mahavira there, right? A stupa.
Mahavihara.
Mahavihara
Oh,
stupa.
Vihara. Yes.
Yeah. Please talk about how he contributed in the Nalanda for this Nalanda thing.
Well, so what Ashoka, Emperor Ashoka was doing, that he was honoring Sariputra. And Sariputra, many of us do not know about Sariputra today, actually. We have forgotten him. But he is very well known in Southeast Asia and all the countries which follow Buddhism or Theravada Buddhism. So Sariputra is the first chief male disciple of Buddha. He was born at Nalanda.
There were 2 disciples, as you have written in the book.
Yes. So Sariputra and Mogglayana. Mogglayana is a very close friend of Sariputra, a bosom buddy. They were born on the same day, in fact, and they made a pact in their childhood that they will also receive enlightenment at the same time together. So Sariputra, he and Mogglayana, they both go to Rajgarh, which is just very very close from Nalanda, 10 kilometers away. And there they meet.
Is it 10 kilometers or 35 kilometers? Because somewhere in the book you have written the distance between the two is 35 kilometers.
No. In the book, no. The between Nalanda and Rajgir or Rajgarh, the distance is hardly 10 kilometers.
Okay. So
they they go to Rajgarh, where they meet Buddha and they hear his words, and they become his disciples. And Sariputra not only becomes a disciple, he's actually a disciple of some other philosopher. His name is Sanjay Belatiputta, and he shares his experience with Buddha. And then 500 followers of Sanjay, they go and meet Buddha, and they become his disciples. So Buddha is very happy. He makes Sariputra his chief male disciple. Now, this is in 6th century BCE. After 300 years, 3rd century BCE, Emperor Ashoka comes on stage, and he learns about Sariputra and his role in spreading Buddhism. And he honors him with a stupa at his birthplace, at the place he received nirvana. And that's the stupa around which the first, vihar, Buddhist vihar is comes up, which teaches Abhidharma. Abhidharma, is it's something which is higher dharma, and this happens during Abhidharma is compiled during the time of Ashoka, when the third Buddhist council takes place in Patliputra, and there's a need for teaching it, and that's why, along with the stupa, Ashoka also founds a Buddhist vihara that gradually grows, over centuries.
And then you write of 6th and 7th century. These two Chinese scholars, I don't know how to pronounce their name, Xinjiang and Yijing.
Xuanzang and Yijing, yes.
Yijing. These two Chinese scholars, basically, these are the two people who have preserved the history of Nalanda, right?
Well,
Yeah.
yes. Very well.
What was their role in preserving Nalanda's history?
Well, so Xuanzang, he belongs to the Tang dynasty in China in 7th century and AD. And he hears about Nalanda far away in China in Shangan, the capital of China that time. And he's very, keen from childhood to learn the true sutras, because Buddhist sutras which have been translated into Mandarin, they have become corrupted, and so he takes arduous journey, defying the diktats of the emperor to leave the Chinese territory, and he comes all the way from Shangan, the Chinese capital, to Nalanda to copy Yoga Chara Bhumi Sutra from the great Sutra library of Nalanda. And he writes his experiences. When he returns back, he carries 657 manuscripts with him, and he writes a book called the Western Records of the Tang Dynasty. And this is the book, which gets translated into French first in 18th century, and that's how the world learns about Nalanda, and Nalanda gets discovered. His colleague, Yijing, he comes around 40 years after Xuanzang's visit to Nalanda.
So there is 40 years difference between the two.
Yes.
And it is the time when Buddhism was flourishing in India.
It's the time when Buddhism was flourishing in East India. Xuanzang records that, there are many monasteries in the northwest of India which are in decline, and many Buddhist monasteries are abandoned. But in east of India, particularly, the Buddhism is on not only flourishing, but it's on the rise. And Nalanda is at its peak that time. There are 10,000 students studying there, and he writes about them, that there are more than 10,000 students, and there are 1,000 teachers, who teach them. He gives a very detailed account of Nalanda, how the Dwarpala Pandit engages in debate and discussions before letting students in. The success rate is only 20%. He writes about every day at Nalanda. Hundreds of lectures are organized in its monasteries every day, which are attended, by everyone. And these monks, he gives a detailed account of their lives.
Then you in the book, after 8th century, decline of the Nalanda starts, and you have given various reasons to it. One of the main reasons was the Muslim rule in India, which then started. I will come
after 10th century.
Yeah. I will come to that part later. But let's directly first jump to the 18th century. And you write about Alexander Cunningham in 1840s or 1840s. How did he actually came to know about Nalanda, and how did the excavation started about this historic state?
Well, so the Nalanda had been forgotten completely. There was no name Nalanda. In fact, this place where ruins of Nalanda are located today was known as Bada Gaon, or
now this is the British era you are talking about, right?
Bada Gaon. This is the place where Nalanda.
No, I'm asking about the Alexander Cunningham. Was this Bada Gaon named that time also?
Yeah. Alexander Cunningham's time, before Alexander Cunningham, comes to the picture, there are local, the district magistrate of Patna, uh, and some, archaeologists. They go to, because this is a place called Bada Gaon, where they find lots of statues scattered here and there. There are mounds, and they feel that this may be some place of some importance, and therefore, Markham Kitto, he goes there, he explores the site and finds that, there are lots of Buddhist statues, and there are Hindu gods and goddesses. So that interests, Alexander Cunningham, and he reads the book, the French translation of uh, of Xuanzang's book, and then he realizes that this place, if he compares it with the current locations, distances from Rajgarh, for example, or from Bodh Gaya, he finds that, this might be the place called Nalanda, and that's how, he thinks that, and then he goes for excavations.
And one of the important, intriguing things which I found interested in your book is about this great library, Dharmaganja, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. Why have we been unable to find it? And what was its contribution about the manuscripts, the books it carried? Talk a bit about its library.
Well, it's called Dharmaganj.
Dharmaganj.
So dharma, it comes from the dharm. Dharma means like it's a library which has three parts. There are three buildings: Ratna Dadi, Ratna Sagara, and Ratna Ranjaka. And one of it is 9 story tall, and it has millions of manuscripts, like handwritten manuscripts, illustrated manuscripts, and this is the library, which is so famous that it makes Xuanzang, the Chinese traveler, to undertake his journey, because his main purpose to come to Nalanda is to copy the Yoga Chara Bhumi Sutra. This is the exact book he is looking at, thinking that he can only get an original copy of this Yoga Chara Bhumi Sutra at this Dharmaganj in Nalanda. And he comes, he copies it, but he also copies 657 other texts. And he says that, at Nalanda, not only Buddhism is taught, but all the known religions are taught, all the known philosophies are taught, grammar is taught, so is mathematics and astronomy, grammar and reasoning, So he gives a complete picture of what is taught at Nalanda. So, and from his writings, we know how Nalanda has become a university. And he tells that, all the subjects which are known to mankind are taught at Nalanda. So there is a universal teaching of subjects. You also have a universal faculty, in the sense that, the teachers are not only from India, but they are from the whole Asia. And students also come from faraway lands. They are from China, from Southeast Asia, Java, Sumatra. They are from Sri Lanka. They are from present day Afghanistan and central India. So that's how we know that Nalanda has become a university by 7th century. And Dharmaganj obviously plays the central role, because most of the scholars are looking at texts. They come there with the motto to copy Buddhist texts.
But we haven't found this library yet, as you have mentioned in the book.
No, see, well, Nalanda, only 10% of Nalanda has been excavated,
Till now.
So far. Till now. So 90% of it is still remains unexcavated. So the library, there are no physical structures of library found yet. But we are sure of a library because of these, when Xuanzang returned to China, he carried 657 texts with him. He copied all of them there, and they are still there in the Wild Goose Pagoda in Xi'an, which is the new name of Shanghai, the ancient Chinese capital. Then you have another traveler, Yijing. He carries 400 Sanskrit texts from Nalanda.
Back to China.
So obviously there was a library. If there was no library, you cannot copy them, right?
So, Mr. Abhay, about the fall of Nalanda, and you have quoted Mr. Ambedkar. And you have put two expressions of Mr. Ambedkar, which he had tried to which you have to rather try to understand. One is the fall of Nalanda, another is decline of Nalanda. Can you explain it for the viewers, the difference between the
Well,
two that Mr. Ambedkar is trying to make?
right. So, see, Nalanda declined in the sense that any institution goes through transformation, and there was, over the centuries, Nalanda itself underwent through several transformations. So, first, the philosophical foundation of Nalanda was led by Nagarjuna actually in the first to second century AD with his philosophy of Shunyata or Madhyamaka. Later on, Nalanda becomes by 5th century Yogacara becomes the main philosophy to be taught there, for which Xuanzang comes to Nalanda in 7th century. But by 8th century, Nalanda becomes a Tantric Buddhist center or Vajrayana center. The Buddhism which is practiced in Tibet today or in Mongolia, that's a Vajrayana Buddhism. Comes from Nalanda. So Buddhism, Nalanda itself is not like a static institution. It is transforming itself, over the centuries. And by the end of the 10th century, the Indian history, if you look at Indian history, Indian history becomes very interesting. It's North India, South India, West India. They are in there is a tripartite struggle which begins among the rulers. And, there is a declining patronage to Buddhism and Buddhist institutions. The money is drying up. Without that, it's not possible for you to really sustain the great institutions. So what happens that there is also a popular bhakti movement. Is taking people away from Buddhism, which has become esoteric.
I was coming to it. And one of the reasons for the decline of Nalanda, you write, is the resurgence of Brahmanism.
Right.
Right.
Puranic Brahmanism. Yes. So you have the Bhakti movement, and people want more concrete way to connect. And Bhakti movement, which started around 7th century in South India, is now impacting North India as well. And you have the resurgence of Brahmanism or Brahmanical, deities, because people are now, also they are able to see that there is no difference between Tantric Buddhism and Hinduism. So the appeal of Tantric Buddhism slowly, declines. You have the Nath sect, the Nath sect, which is Matyasendranath, Gorakhnath. All these, they are a sect of Buddhism actually, of Tantric Buddhism, but they become also a link to Hinduism actually. So the boundaries are becoming blurred, and slowly there is growing popularity among the masses of through the Bhakti movement, through the saints, through this changing nature of worship. So Puranic Brahmanism becomes more prominent. So these are the two, but then there is also, so there is already, Nalanda is already moving towards sunset. Not only Nalanda but Buddhism after the Pala dynasty. The patronage declines, and you have the last king of Gaharwal king, Jaichand. His teacher is a Buddhist, but most of the Gaharwal donations are going to Hindu establishments. So this is something which is already happening. But what you call coup de grace, it's already towards the decline. But the fall comes from the invasions, Turk invasions, and yes.
Coming to the Muslim rulers now and the decline of Nalanda, you write about Bakhtiyar Khilji. You write that he was the responsible, but you have also written that there is a dispute among scholars whether he was actually responsible for the destruction or not. So, what is the role of this Bakhtiyar Khilji?
Well, so you have to see the historical context. You have, as I said, North India has already become politically weak, economically and militarily weak because of the tripartite struggle. Then you have the Battle of Tarai. The first battle, Prithviraj Chauhan wins against Muhammad of Ghor. The second battle, he loses it. And once he loses it, Muhammad of Ghor sends 3 generals, to to capture or to defeat the rulers in North India. One of them is Qutbuddin Aibak, and another one of them is Bakhtiyar Khilji. Now, Bakhtiyar Khilji is if you look at the biography of Bakhtiyar Khilji, how he has made it to a general, become a general of Muhammad of Ghor. He has a very checkered history. So his key aim is to, get rich quickly. He's not there really for, consolidating power. So he marches to, North India with only 200 horses, and men, not too many men. And then he's moving in North India unopposed. Now he thinks that Buddhist monasteries have lots of wealth, and maybe it's a wrong perception, but he thinks so. And he wants to raid all possible Buddhist monasteries in North India and also the Buddhist monasteries of Tibet. Actually, that's his original plan. So first he goes to Odantpuri, and this is an account of Intabakht Nasiri, by Minhaj Sirazi, who is a historian from Delhi. He's a Delhi best historian, and he writes that how Bakhtiyar Khilji goes to Odantpuri, which is today known as Bihar Sharif, and it's only 12 kilometers from Nalanda. So he gives a vivid description of his raid of Odantpuri, which he thinks Bakhtiyar thinks that it's a fort, but it turns out to be a monastery, and but he goes there unopposed, and but now Nalanda is just 12 kilometers away. So you may say that there is no historical account. I mean, there's no mention of actually Bakhtiyar Khilji going to Nalanda in Minhaj Sirazi's book. But seeing the distance from Odantpuri or Bihar Sharif to Nalanda being just 10 kilometers, he may have gone there. I mean, this is something called circumstantial evidence. But the picture, the real picture comes from what happens afterwards. So then Bakhtiyar Khilji tries to cross the Brahmaputra river to go to Tibet. Half of his troops are flown away in the river, and his own second in command, lieutenant, he assassinates him. That's the end of Bakhtiyar Khilji's story. But in 1235, you have a Tibetan monk called Dharmaswami who comes to Nalanda.
The last foreign scholar.
The last foreign scholar. So Dharmaswami comes to Nalanda, and he sees that Nalanda, out of 14 Mahaviharas, only 2 are functional, and you have a 90-year-old monk, Rahul Sri Bhadra, who is there with another 60 monks whom he is teaching students. And Nalanda is being raided continuously by the Turks who are based in Odantpuri or Bihar Sharif. The Odantpuri monastery becomes a military headquarters, and he gives a vivid picture of what happens. So what transpired between 1196 and 1236. So that gives you some hint of what could have
happened.
Possible, and in fact, Nalanda is so large. It's like today's JNU. If you want to even destroy Nalanda, you cannot destroy it even in dozen raids. Forget about 1 or 2. So these raids are happening continuously over 40 years. You can see what's happening there. And but Nalanda continues to function. Even in 1235, it's functioning. So Nalanda was there was raids and destructions, but it was not completely destroyed. The towers of Nalanda were still there. The boundary wall was still there in 1236, and then you have early 14th century. The last famous monk from Nalanda, his name is Dhyanabhadra, who becomes a famous monk, goes to Korea, and China. And he says that he was ordained at Nalanda in early 14th century. So that's the story of Nalanda. Now, more excavations are required, more historical records are needed. But you do have, fleeing of monks from there, and you don't need really, there's a whole ecosystem. Nalanda is not alone there. Nalanda exists there with Odantpuri, it exists with Bikramsila, it exists with other monasteries there. So if the law and order situation goes bad, you don't really have to directly destroy Nalanda. It will be destroyed anyway, because more educational institutions, they need peace, they need support of the state to function.
Mr. Abhay, our last 5 minutes are left. And let me pose my last question to you. On the cover of the book, there is this flower and a snake in between.
Right.
Can you explain it for the viewers?
Yes.
What is this?
Right. Well, so as per the legend, Nalanda is actually a snake. It's a naga.
It's a naga.
And Naga. And Magad has this ancient cult worship of the Nagas and the serpents. And actually, early Buddhism uses Nagas and the serpent and the tree. So recently there was an exhibition at Met Museum in New York, which was titled "Serpent and the Tree," and it explores early Buddhism and how early Buddhism uses the iconography of ancient practices, local practices of Magad. So that's why Nalanda is a place which is also known as Nagananda, so a place which is blessed by the Naga. And so the Naga lives in a pond, there. And Naga's name is Nalanda, and lives in a pond, and pond is full of lotus flowers. So you can see on the cover, the lotus flowers there.
And the snake.
Yes, and the snake. And so that's why, but you will see a snake there is in the form of 4, in Devanagari script, which sort of represents the 4 noble truths of Buddhism. And total, there are 8 flowers, so which are like the 8-fold path of Buddha, for Nirvana.
Abhay, thank you very much for your time, and thank you very much for this wonderful book. Let me hold this once again for the viewers so they buy it, read it, and understand actually what Nalanda is. And I hope that this real generation understands the history in the proper perspective. Pleasure talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Please subscribe to our channel Roportaj and press the bell icon to remain updated.